I'm sad to say that I'm back in a sweater here in chilly Wisconsin. We went from 80 degrees down to 50 in the matter of a few hours. Pretty depressing. But we're here on LinkedIn Live again. I want to first start by thanking if you are in attendance and you've been joining us the last few sessions. We appreciate the feedback and the interest that you've expressed in our recent resources. It's good to get that constructive feedback so that we continue to provide content that's valuable to our audience here. So my name is Jared Hackbart. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing at Brilliance and been here for a little over 5 years now, and very excited to be talking about the idea and the cost of doing nothing, not making a decision. I'm going to pass it to Lori to introduce herself.
Yes. Hello, I'm Lori McDonald. I started Brilliance a little more than 20 years ago. My background's in computer electrical engineering. I went to school at Purdue and ended up through an internship at NASA Johnson Space Center, where I eventually worked as a flight controller for the space shuttle program. It was a really great experience. I ended up meeting my husband there. He also was an engineer at Purdue and a flight controller at NASA. And eventually he went to work for Rockwell Automation, initially out of a field office in Houston, Texas. And then eventually he had a promotion to Rockwell's headquarters here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And we ended up relocating here. And I was trying to figure out what could be as cool as space. And so I decided to start a web development company. That was in 1998. And with my technical background and his experience at Rockwell, we found we were uniquely equipped to work in the B2B space, creating digital commerce solutions for manufacturers and distributors. And so that's become our niche as an organization. That's what Brilliance Business Solutions is all about. And we've grown. 10 years ago, Dave left his job. My husband left his job at Rockwell, and now he leads our development team. We made the Inc. 5000 list last year and are seeing a lot of really exciting growth for us and for our clients. So I'm really excited about the conversation that we're having today.
Absolutely. We are having a conversation that's we're going to touch digital, because certainly the idea of foregoing a decision to move forward with an implementation or feature change or whatever it may be, there's various decisions that are made throughout the digital process that we can touch on. But this also goes higher than that. It goes above to more of the strategic executive level thinking as well. And, as Lori and I were kicking around ideas for topics to discuss, this one came to the top of mind because this is something that we recognize that we fall into this trap once again, specifically on the sales and marketing team. On our side, we constantly are looking at new things to pull the trigger on and to invest in and to try new things and do different things for the business, and often we kick it down the hill because we just kick it down the hill for various reasons. And so through additional research and other industry experts, we sat here wondering what's the cost of not making that decision. And so here we are having this conversation today. So as we kick it off, I'd love to start with, how does a no decision or a delayed decision affect your business? Lori, do you want to start with your opinion?
Yeah, well, I think it can, there are multiple ways a no decision affects your business. And really what we're talking about here is when an organization has put together a team of people who's like researching buying something, or actually, well, I guess it doesn't need to be buying something, but I became interested in this based on some research I know we'll hit on later that talks about buying teams that don't end up making a decision. But the reality is it could also be, to your point, Jared, it could also be any strategic decision, a decision that's a bigger, more considered decision as a business is really what we're talking about here, that you're thinking about a potential strategy or a change, and you don't actually, and that you do some research, but that you don't actually make a decision. And when you think about what happens, how that affects your business, there are multiple things. One is you're not going to see the benefit, the resulting potential benefit of that decision. So, in terms of revenue growth or profit or gained market share. The other downside is, also like your competitors are at least some of them are making decisions and are in some cases making decisions quickly. And Mark Zuckerberg actually, like I think he said, move fast and break things. And unless you're breaking stuff, you're not moving fast enough. And so there's this element of making decisions is something that enables us to learn. And even if some of our decisions end up being wrong, if we're not making the decisions, we won't be able to learn from them and get better. And so actually, making the decisions themselves enables us to learn as an organization and grow, whether or not that decision ended up being a good one or not. And then the other thing I think for our team, when I think about organizationally for our teams and the mindset and the culture we create internally, if we're having people spend time on decisions where they're doing a bunch of research and things like that, and then nothing is really done with it, that can be a really frustrating experience for people that are a part of that process, who may potentially, it may be signs of other issues that exist internally. Yeah.
And the potential long-term effects of that from the culture perspective. Next time you are looking to dive into another project or research some sort of change that you're going to implement within the organization, you might have less buy-in from your team or interest from your team because they just went through something like this, in the past, and you end up not doing anything with that. And like you said, that can be a frustrating experience.
Yeah.
And certainly an indication of potentially other issues within your organization. So we've covered the high level topics of what we're hitting here. We have discussed and researched and read and listened to various ways of approaching decision making differently that enable you to get to a decision faster, that enable you to get to a good decision. Would you like to start with growth mindset? Or I know you referenced the Hank Barnes article a little bit ago. Where do you want to take this first part of the conversation?
Sure. Well, sure. We can talk about growth mindset. I think mindset, there are many aspects of, what makes a team, what sets up a team best to enable them to make good decisions. I think certainly having a culture and a team that has both as individually and as a group has a growth mindset, which really means that you believe that your knowledge is not fixed, that if you don't know how to do something today, you can learn, and that you approach problems with that kind of attitude, that like, we may not know how to do this now, but that's not going to keep me from engaging and learning how and figuring out how to approach it. So I think that's a really good just foundation as a whole for what we do in business in general. It can be really hard to make progress if you don't have a growth mindset. Yeah. And in terms of and we've referenced a few times this article, and actually there's a series. So we're Gartner clients, and one an analyst that I love to read and watch. I've been in some of his workshops and listen to is Hank Barnes. He's got some really great content, and he shared some public blogs. Which, one of the neat things, if you're not a Gartner client, there are some great resources that you can get access to through their webinars and their blogs for free. And I think we'll share some of the links to these. But what's really interesting is there was some recent research that came out from Hank Barnes showing that in the last 2 years, close to 50% of the buying teams that engaged to make a decision, to make a purchase decision, resulted in no decision. And while we might think right now that has to do with COVID, that actually a lot of the reasons weren't due to COVID in terms of why that's happening. And it was happening and it also was happening in 2019. So like, what is really happening there? And this is something actually that Hank's been researching since, like, he has a blog post on it back in 2015, where he's looking at this as well. And in 2019, like, this is something that happens frequently. And one of his other points of research talks about the fact that in their research, they're seeing that people with a greater buying teams that have more decisions that result in no decisions, the decisions that they do make are less likely to be high quality decisions where they feel satisfied with the decision that they made. Which is really interesting in terms of so actually, the more likely you are to not make a decision, there's a relationship there in terms of the quality of the decisions you are making. And so one of his hypotheses that he is testing out is, does that mean, is that an indication that teams that don't make a decision are struggling to have good decision-making processes? So Jared, I'm curious, I know you and I were talking about the Hank Barnes articles a bunch. Like what have you found interesting about them?
Yeah, I will agree. I echo. I am a huge Hank Barnes fan. I had the opportunity to sit down with him when we were at the Tech Growth and Innovation Summit in San Diego a couple of years ago in a one-on-one session. And yeah, I'd highly recommend if you aren't familiar with Hank Barnes and his work at Gartner, go and look him up. But specific to the decision-making conversation we're having, actually a few months ago now, we had a exploration tech session with Ted Fay. Opportunity to sit down with him. Is that
Did you hear?
Yeah. Hello?
You hear me okay?
I can hear you. I heard someone else who was throwing me off a second there.
Okay, sorry. Sorry.
All good. But we had Ted Fay on Exploration Tech. Ted Fay is a marketer extraordinaire. He actually just took on a new role, and I'm blanking where it is, but he's very experienced marketer, and he's excellent, great person. But he had recommended as a piece to building out your marketing team that you should be holding a weekly book club session or a weekly just connect session. And it seems so basic, but I was like, I love the idea. And so we started doing that. And through that process, we've kind of rotated in the sales and marketing team and who was going to be responsible for selecting the content that week. And I ended up I want to say our office administrator actually ended up selecting a topic about getting to decisions quicker. And it was a TED Talk by a gentleman named, now I'm going to forget his name off the top of my head, Patrick McGinnis. And he's a entrepreneur / strategic advisor, investor, runs an advisor organization. But what I really valued in what he had shared were two points that stood out to me. One, the idea of FOBO, which is the fear of a better option. And he talks through how often in a decision-making process that the biggest component of holding someone up and moving forward with something is that idea of a fear of a better option. Is they go through all this research and you just constantly are looking for what could be better than what I currently have. And that resonated with me for various reasons. But when I think of the space we're in, specifically in digital, with things innovating and changing so quickly, I do believe that there is a constant thought in the back of your head of, am I going to pull the trigger on something like this and find out 2 weeks later that there's something doing exactly what I'm looking for versus something that's doing kind of what I'm looking for. Yeah. And the other topic that related to the decision-making process was his approach for, and this made me think of RFPs, and Lori knows my opinion on RFPs. I am not a fan of RFPs, but so he kind of pleaded to my case in this, but I loved it regardless. And he sat here, spoke to the idea of eliminating inferior options by comparing each option to your front runner. And so specifically, like once you are looking, when you're in a decision process and you automatically have kind of one that you've figured out, that's going to be kind of your go-to decision. Anytime you're looking at any other option, the first thing you should be doing, and again, it feels like maybe a little bit of common sense, but I think you lose sight of it and overly complex decisions. But you should always be taking those other options and comparing against the front runner. And immediately, as soon as you get into that process and you see that it's inferior in some way, eliminating that option. And once it's eliminated, do not bring it up again. It's gone. Like that whole idea to me really, I don't know, it really spoke to me because I feel like specifically in our processes on the sales and marketing team here at Brilliance, there's often times where we have a list of ideas, we're going through these ideas, and we may decide that we're not going to do one of them, and we kind of keep it on the list still. It just kind of moves over to the side a little bit versus being completely wiped out. And I feel like perhaps what we should be doing is wiping it out so that we are continuing to support the idea of better decision-making process. But regardless, I'd highly recommend going and checking out. He's got a book called The Fear of Missing Out, but he also has kind of coined the topic of the fear of a better option. So check out Patrick McGinnis.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Another book that I read that I know I was sharing with you, Jared, is called Decisive by Chip and Dan Heath. And it has some really interesting research and recommendations around how to make good decisions. And, a few of the things that they hit on are the idea that, trying to actively do things that will counter your confirmation bias. The fact that once you have an idea, once you're drawn to something, that you will tend to find evidence to support it. And, and so part of what they recommend is ensuring that you're hearing from people that disagree with you. And that you're trying to look for voices that don't confirm what you believe you should do, and using that to help you make a better decision. And what's really interesting to me about that is that in the end, even if you end up going with the decision that you originally had planned, by listening to people that disagree with you and hearing them and really considering their feedback, the way you approach working with the solution you had picked might be different. Like it may be that you put other controls in place to help mitigate some risks that other people had pointed out. And they also talk about like broadening the scope. Like we look at a decision as an either or, like either I'm doing this or I'm doing that. But they're often like, usually you can take a step back and like take a different approach entirely. So again, there's some really great resources. The other one I think about, Jared, that we read as a leadership team is Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke, which is, this idea of, when you're making a decision, like just understanding the level of risk involved and like naming it, like saying, like, at least this was my major takeaway from the book. She had other things that she talked about, but like saying, I'm 60% confident this is what we should do. Like, and just being cognizant of the fact, and also not getting hung up on the fact that some of our decisions won't turn out the way we planned, but not letting that hang us up, that like we just need to push through it anyway, take our best bet and learn from it. Yeah.
I enjoyed our book, reading that book together as a leadership team, for various reasons. It's fun for those who like cards and are interested in the World Series of Poker, those types of things. She speaks to that. She also has a talk on Google. You can find. I think she spoke at Google. It's free. It's out there on YouTube somewhere, where she kind of goes through some of the bullet points of her book. But it is a great book, and I agree with you, Lori. I think just the idea of naming, that, laying it out, being transparent. This is where my head's at. I'm not 100% confident this is going to work, but I'm 80% confident in this decision, and having that level of transparency with your team, I think is incredibly valuable, so that you're all on the same page. You identify the risks in some sense, which is where I want to take the conversation next was, unfortunately in our space, in the digital space, there was some stat, and maybe you can recall it. I think it actually had come from Gartner, but more often than not, digital projects are failing, at least from the customer's perspective, rather than being successful. We've certainly taken steps as an organization with our on time and on budget guarantee to help mitigate that risk. But are there? Well, maybe you want to speak to that more detail, how we got to that, and why that's so important to us. But I'm curious if you have any other ideas for how would an organization minimize risk on a project?
Yeah, well, I think it's really so that's key, and I think it's one of the reasons. It's not the only reason, but one of the reasons that people don't move forward with the decision is because of the risk involved, and fear of change, and so really, as you approach a decision, like we were talking about, naming the risk and then figuring out ways to mitigate it, and yeah, in our space, we frequently encounter projects that, we've taken over multiple projects that started with another development firm agency, didn't go well, and then we're hired as the second firm that's implementing their site. And that's a really I feel for whenever that happens. I feel for the customer that we're working for. That's a difficult experience for them to go through. And we've seen, in our 20 plus years in business, we've seen it enough to say, what are the ways that we can ensure we're supporting customers and being confident that that's not the experience that they're going to have with us. And so really trying to think about how we can structure our projects so we can give customers confidence that their sites will launch on time and on budget. And so really that's just the approach we've taken of how we've designed a discovery and scoping process, and ways that we take people through the process of building their site that enable us to say, we'll guarantee the cost, we'll guarantee your launch date. And that's not something that you find in a lot of places. I would say, in general, if you were looking to minimize your risk on a project, here are things that I would do. I would look at how you minimize the scope of what you're doing initially with a new vendor. Don't try and do it all at once. Both in part because it'll make the project cost less, but also because it enables you to learn about your relationship with the vendor and how dependable that relationship will be as a part of the process. I think looking for someone who's done similar work to what you're asking for before is important. I think talking to customers, hearing references of what their work is like is important. I think another way to minimize risk, if one of the challenges that exists in the digital space is that projects can get expensive as organizations look at, or maybe I should say it this way, projects can get more expensive than a customer might have planned on. It's hard for people to know what something's going to cost when they go in, unless they've done a lot of this before, and many companies haven't. And so I think, again, coming back to that idea of looking for ways to bite off smaller chunks of the project initially. Like maybe you were thinking of replatforming your entire site, but maybe initially you just set up a parts store, or looking for ways that you can step into it and still do something, but maybe not do all of it, learn from it. And then also identify, it's a conversation we'll have with customers about what are the highest risk areas of the project. Like often data integrations are a high risk area because they tend to be complex, and sometimes they aren't well understood even by an internal team in terms of what's happening with it, in terms of like how the data is structured or things like that. So looking at what risks exist and like coming up with a plan of like, how are we going to mitigate that? Like what ways are we going to approach ensuring that we have additional plans around helping to ensure that doesn't trip us up?
Yeah, as I reflect on the conversations that we've had with customers, like John Harsh at Gez Wine is a great example. He was on another session of Exploration Tech. Outside of what you shared, I think having the right people in the room and making sure that, as you're going through that idea of formalizing that MVP approach to a project, I think a significant portion of that being successful is having the buy-in from the right people in the room, having the various teams that are on, making sure everyone again is on the same page and transparent, and having a true understanding of what this is going to take is key. And then again, it almost feels silly saying it, but the idea of just pure over communication on any project. I think that's why, we've structured our organization the way we have on the operations side, that there's various touch points. We have someone who manages the project overall, but you also have, various other individuals that will be associated throughout the project and meeting directly with the client. I think just the opportunity to have various touch points can be a critical piece, because someone might hear something differently than another person would, and just making sure that you're constantly, having that level of communication is incredibly critical, especially in these more complex situations with digital commerce.
One other thing I would add, related to communication is project management. And can be, so when we talk about risk, well, two things related to communication is project management. And the other is, we've talked about it before on here, but one of the values we have at Brilliance is trust through healthy conflict. And I think one way to minimize risk is to ensure that you've set an expectation, both internally on your team and with your external vendors you're working with, that if there's an issue or someone sees something that seems like it might be a problem, or hears a conversation and thinks, I'm not certain this is right, that they say something. Because sometimes in our team environments, we create an expectation that I shouldn't say something because, I'm going to be rocking the boat or upsetting people. We want to ensure that if we see something that's a potential problem, even if it's us that made a mistake, that we say something. Because our belief is that it results that is the partner that we should be to our client, is that we should be coming to them and saying, here's a potential issue, here's how we're going to resolve it, versus not saying something and letting something get off the rails. And that's something that we work to do internally, is to ensure that we're challenging each other when we see things that that we differ in our opinion on. So that we can work through and create a better product.
Yeah. Something we didn't really touch on, but I want to kind of bring it full circle, and we'd be happy to have additional conversations with anyone who's interested, is the financial piece, I guess, of the cost of doing nothing.
Yeah.
Specific to our space, again, if you are someone who's looking at project and you've realized that perhaps you're experiencing a little bit of FOBO, that you're stuck in a decision-making process, and you're looking for some validation on whether or not investing in a new solution is going to provide you the return on investment that you're looking for. We have some tools that we'd be happy to share with and go through as well. But obviously there's a component to that. So I just wanted to kind of bring it back to the original topic, which is, if you are stuck in a decision process and you are in the digital space and you're going through this and you are, some of what you've heard today is resonating with you, we'd be happy to have ongoing conversation with you to help you kind of maybe untangle some of this, look through some of the tools that we have to help you validate that, moving forward is valuable for your organization. And helping you take next steps from there. Lori, anything you'd like to add as we close out today's session?
Yeah, just to what you said, Jared. I mean, I think especially when we were talking about digital commerce, generally making a decision enables you to make more money, it should. That's the way it should be structured. It has an ROI, and so working with someone that can help you, and we're certainly happy to support on that. We've got a calculator that helps to look at what your potential ROI is, what your potential growth in profits, that can help to know. For me, if I know that by spending $5, I'm going to get back 10, there's not a whole reason not to spend the $5, right? And so I think getting clear on what the ROI is, and also doing some of the other stuff we talked about here can really help in terms of that process too. So yeah, this was fun.
Yes, it always is. So if you are interested in connecting, you can find both Lori and myself on LinkedIn. I will throw this in since I didn't get to it at the beginning. If you do have a minute, please give us a follow on LinkedIn on our Brilliance page. We'd certainly appreciate that. We are always looking to continue to create as much great content as we possibly can. We got a couple guests coming up for our Exploration Tech series here in the near future, so keep on the lookout for that. And yeah, as we've mentioned now, if you're interested in having a continued conversation on this topic, or if you're looking for some assistance in understanding the opportunity for ROI within a digital commerce solution, or you're stuck in a decision-making process, we'd be happy to support you. Thanks for your time. Have a great day.